Welcome to the Bald Explorer reading of English Journey by J.B. Prestley. It's the 8th of April 2018. And hello to everybody who is joining me live, or to those people who are watching it after the event. I changed the mood in the studio a little bit just to be more conducive to the reading. I've also put a light just above me up here. You might be interested to know. There it is, little light shining down on me so I can actually see the text a bit better. I've subdued the light in the back, and I've just slightly gelled down my Bald Explorer. You can't really see it brilliantly there, unfortunately, but it's actually got pink lettering where it says the Bald Explorer and a slightly purpley head of me. Anyway, welcome to Lisa, to Graham Roffey, and to Sarah. Good morning to you, and anybody else who's coming in to think, what the hell's going on? As I'm sure people must join and think, what is the hell going on? Well, we've got a bit of a reading happening here. So I'm going to crack straight on today without too much preamble. We can do preamble at the end. Just aware that when people watch the rerun, they don't want all the nonsense at the beginning. Are you private family physicians closed like they are here in the US, says Lisa. You mean our GPs, our general practitioners? I'm not quite sure what the state is, actually, to be honest with you, not having had to use them for a long time. I think the surgeries are open, but not only visitation if by appointment. So you would have to ring them up and get some form of appointment, I imagine. Johnny Parsons, hello to you, and Mr. O'Connell, hello from Manchester. Hope you're all well. It's a bit overcast today, not as sunny as it was. So, carrying on with West Riding, I'm hoping to get out of West Riding in the next... I'm just looking to see how much of it. There is quite a bit in the West Riding. That's up in Yorkshire for those people. So we'll just see how far we get, and hopefully my reading will be a bit better now that I've got a bit of light on the subject. Let me just move that out of my way. The rain stopped, but it remained a wettish, raw night. I explored all the centre of the city and discovered that there were one or two very small cafes open, and then, from 7 o'clock onwards, all the pubs and nothing else. You could take your choice, and either promenade up and down Darley Street, North Parade, Manningham Lane, or go to the nearest pub. Ever since I can remember, elderly citizens have been protesting against this practice of promenading on Sunday nights. They've always been disgusted by the sight of young people monkey parading in this fashion. It is, however, these same elderly citizens who have seen to it that nearly all doors leading to out of the street shall be locked against these young people. They cannot listen to plays or music, cannot see films, cannot even sit in a big pleasant room and look at one another. So they walk up and down the street. No doubt some of them would always want to promenade, even on nights like this, though it does seem incredible. But most of them would obviously prefer one of a dozen different ways to spend their Sunday evening. They have, of course, to get on with their mating, whatever the elderly people may think of them, but they could easily do it in a much more civilised fashion than this monkey parading. Having seen the promenaders, I thought I would try one of the only places of entertainment allowed to them, the pubs. The first one I visited was very quiet. It was still early, and in the lounge I entered, there were only 5 or 6 hobbledehoys drinking glasses of bitter and elaborately chaffing the barmaid in a traditional style. I love that term, hobbledehoys. Isn't that great? Nothing wrong with the place except that it was dull and stupid. The next pub, a large, gaudy affair, was doing better business. Its chief customers were either young men who stared, whispered, suddenly guffawed, and a number of youngish females who, if they were not women of the town, had certainly taken the most astonishing pains to disguise themselves as such, even on putting on swollen, greedy faces of the type. Nothing much was happening there. An occasional guffaw, another order of drinks, a move from this little table to that, with the women of the town grimacing over their stouts and ports and missing nothing. It's interesting to think that women were drinking stouts and ports back in 1933. This is not attack on the place. I have not the least desire to see it closed, but I am puzzled to know why it would be open when so many obviously better places, the Civic Theatre, for example, are shut. I cannot see why playgoing, listening to music, watching films, even dancing should be considered much worse, or at least more secular, than sitting and boozing with prostitutes. Incidentally, how ironic it is that the process of turning oneself into a streetwalker should still be called going gay, for anything less gay, anything more monotonous, dull, dreary, senseless, sordid than the whole way of life, and the surrounding habits, the manners and outlook of these women here in England can hardly be imagined. They are nearly always exactly what they are: gross, greedy and stupid, and worlds away from the frail butterflies, the lights of love, sentimentalised over very young novelists. I then had a short walk and ventured into pub number 3, a large establishment that seemed to be doing very brisk trade. This time the lounge was crowded with people and thick with smoke, boasted some little coloured lights, but that was all. Nothing else, not even reasonable comfort, but it was enough, and every table, every seat was taken. 15 shillings worth of coloured lamps. This was gaiety, this was life, and the place was selling beer, stout, port as fast as you can serve them to patrons of both sexes. I do not think that these people, and they were mostly young, pairs of boys, pairs of girls, here and there an older couple, could be said to really be enjoying themselves, but at least they could look at one another and giggle a bit, talk when they found something to say, and admire the carnival splendour of the coloured electric lights. They didn't want to go home, they didn't want to walk up and down the streets, so here they were. I endured about a quarter an hour of it, and then marched out to walk the 2 miles or so to my home. How bizarre. As I went, I considered this pitiful evening that I had passed in the centre of the city, with its 300,000 people. What a miserable, barbaric affair! I asked myself what I would have done, supposing I was a young man who had come here to work and was living in not very comfortable or amusing lodgings. This was Sunday night, and a dark, wettish Sunday night, a melancholy tract of time, with Monday morning waiting to pounce on me at the end of it. What would I have done? What would I have done? What was there to do? It's hard to tell, but I arrived at the conclusion that I would have found one of the quiet pubs, and there floated the dismal evening away on a full tide of drink. And if I was tight at the end of it, I told myself, all the better. So much for this fine provincial Sabbath. I told myself, too, that if I had a young son or daughter whose work took him or her away from home to live in one of these towns, I should object if there was a Sabbatarian town of this kind, which would offer its young folk nothing on a Sunday night but a choice between monkey parading and dubious pubs. Please forgive me, I would say, a wicked wide open city, busy, dishonouring its Sabbath, blazing with nights on a Sunday evening, with concerts, theatres, cinemas, dance halls, restaurants, in full naughty swing. There I would trust my innocent child, but not, oh, never, in this barbaric gloom and boredom. Thus ended my back is still just this sitting down business. Thus ended with myself addressing a full applauding meeting of selves my Sunday evening. basically, thus he ended his chatting to himself. That's what I was trying to say, but failed miserably. If they would suggest you could get some trigger point injections, it will almost immediately stop the muscle. Yes, I don't know that they may do that, but to be honest with you, it will clear up. You just grin and bear it, it's the British way. Stiff upper lip. Ouch! Stiff upper lip and all that. It's actually, I did think about trying to do this standing up because it is getting better. It's just certain positions it doesn't like, and I have sort of exercised the muscle a bit. So it is it's a pain because I can feel it seizing a little. But anyway, we're doing all right. Good morning to Andy, to Audrey, to Leslie, and to Philip, to Les, and anybody else I haven't mentioned. Thank you very much for joining me again. I've got more of this rather splendid squash. All doctors are not seeing anybody face to face. Can't get my steroid injections. Oh, well, there we are. So, yes, we do have to sort of somewhat grin and bear it. Having arrived at my old home, I let the journey proper look after itself for a few days while I went prowling about, renewing the past and exploring the present. I didn't remain in Bradford all the time, for one West Riding town is not distinctly separate from another, and so you're tempted to roam, unless you're so sensitive and silly that the whole grim region frightens you into seeing as little of it as possible. I went to Leeds, that companion city, which crazy, ignorant southerners are apt to confuse with Bradford, to the disgust of both sets of citizens. With its university, law courts, mixed industries, position as the shopping and amusement centre of West Riding, Leeds is rather more civilised than Bradford, but to my mind, and remember I am a Bradfordian, far more dismal and less interesting. It is not the authentic, queer, carved out of the Pennines look of Bradford and of some of the other towns. It's a large, dirty town that might almost be anywhere, and mostly built of sooty brick. I've been to Leeds, and it's pretty apt description. It's 90 years ago. It's cheap clothing. Not that I went there 90 years ago. Thank you. Its cheap clothing trade has given it a big Jewish colony, formerly recruited, I believe, from the Polish and Russian ghettos. This Jewish element seems to be far more in evidence before the war than it is now, possibly because the flow of Jews from Eastern Europe is drying up. But there is still plenty of Yiddish in Leeds, and I can see it on the surface of its life traces of that restless glitter which is the gift of the Jew. I had another look at Halifax, which is more interesting than Leeds as a genuine West Riding product. It must be the most hilliest town of its size in England. These factories and rows of houses seem to be sticking up and out at all mad angles. The trams, groaning desperately, go mountaineering, and at night they look like luminous beetles swarming up and down a black wall. It is a grim, craggy place, piercingly cold in winter. When I first enlisted, I was sent to the barracks in Halifax. There they were, in Gibbet Lane. I was there in the early days of that fine September of 1914, but I never recollect Gibbet Lane offering us anything but a Siberian bleakness. The folk there are honest, sharp-tongued, but kindly. They make heavy woolen stuff and carpets, and they delight in singing Handel and the Gilbert and Sullivan operas. You can meet them, a trifle subdued perhaps, but there to the last walked, in the solid, downright fraction... Sorry, I'm not quite sure where he's going with this. You can meet them, a trifle subdued perhaps, but there to the last walked, in the solid, downright fiction of my friend, Phyllis Bentley, who writes perched on that hillside. Beyond Halifax are rum desolate outposts like Sowerby Bridge and Luddenfoot, and beyond them are the moors. These high moors form the west boundary for all this district. They're just the same as they always were, and there they wait, probably for the ruin of this trumpety textile trade, this flickering episode of man's activity and cunning. The West Riding keeps one eye on the mills and markets, and the other on the moors. It's surprising how close their desolation is. One afternoon I ran out to see an old friend at Thornton, an industrial village hanging on the west edge of Bradford, and only threepenny tram ride from the town hall. 10 minutes in a car from Thornton took us to Withens on the moor, where we had some tea while some heavy sleet slashed at the windows. We might have been on the Outer Hebrides. Withens itself is a low square stone building, half farmhouse, half inn, and it stands on the brink of nothing but bog and wild weather. You feel that any moment Heathcliff may be roaming in the doorway. It is only up here that you can believe. It's only up here that you can believe in such people as Heathcliff. But then, up here, you can probably believe in anything. What you cannot believe is that the Bradford Exchanger and Chamber of Commerce is only an hour away. The world they represent has dropped clean out of sight and mind. These winds, savage and exhilarating, have never known the black load of smoke, and would, it seems, tear down a factory chimney in 2 minutes. Withens. The very name whisks away all the warehouses and streets and rows of houses and shops and traffic signs and policemen and rate collectors, and leaves you gasping on the brown wet roof of England. Most of my time, however, I spent in Bradford itself, renewing old acquaintances with people and places. Among the latter was the Covered Market, our nearest approach to the Oriental Bazaar. The stalls are not temporary affairs, but permanent fixtures, shops without windows, and most of them have been in the same hands ever since I can remember. On one side there are still queer old-fashioned eating places, where you tuck into boiled cod and steak pie, sitting in pews. On the other side are the music stalls, where, if you linger a second, the assistants pounce upon you at once and conjure the florins out of your pocket. It was one of these stalls years ago when I was at one of these stalls years ago when I was a schoolboy that I bought, in a lunatic fit, that most melancholy instrument, a one-stringed fiddle. It cost £1 or £2, and I paid for it laboriously in shillings and sixpences. You oughtn't to do that," observed the assistants, a supercilious young man. "Looks as if you've been saving up." And as that was precisely what I had been doing, I was lost in shame. A month or two afterwards, I swapped the one-stringed fiddle with a deerstalker hat, owned by a friend of mine who had about as much use of it as he would have for the fiddle, or as I really had for either. Between the music at one extreme and the boiled cod in pews at the other, there are rows and rows of drapery, boot and shoe, confectionery, grocery stalls. There are several bookstalls, and the owner of one of them grabbed hold of me and said in that aggressive tone we use with one another in Bradford, "Nay, I've got something to show you. You've got a minute to spare, ain't you? All right, then. Nay, just come with me." He led me from his stall to the market entrance, where we climbed some stairs. At the top there were rooms and rooms lined with new books. "Stock, that is," he told me, waving a hand. "All stock. And then they tell you there isn't a bookshop at any size. Look at that lot, all sorted out too, aye, in proper alphabetical order. What do you think of that?" I told him it was a noble sight and a prodigal display, and didn't dare to hint that there seemed to me very few good books in this vast collection. But if it was a question of quantity, not quality, he certainly had justified himself. I think that if I had a shop in Bradford, I would insist upon it being in the market, where they all know one another and are always having cups of tea. You see funeral wreaths hobnobbing in genteel fashion with cheap biscuits, dress goods, and fence, listening to the troubles of toffee and Hamburgs. I don't know what a fent is, F-E-N-T, a fent. Listening to the troubles of toffee and Hamburgs. Ladies' shoes smiling over the teapot at scarves and jumpers. I might do worse when I am old and out of fashion and bankrupt of ideas, a faded scribbler, than to run my own town and take a bookshop in the market and smoke my pipe and have a cup of tea like the rest and lend a benevolent ear to the confidences of the girls in the sheet music and the cut-price grocery lines. I should be snug all day under that great roof, could stare at the bright little pageant of humble commerce, could eat frugally in the neighbouring pews, and when I died there might easily come my way a free funeral wreath, only a trifle damaged. How quaint, how very quaint. What have we got out there? Hello, Michael. Hello, Barry. Overcast day. Yes, overcast here as well. Mary, sorry, once you're back has a weak spot, it never goes away, so anything can start it off again. Oh, let's hope not. I'm usually very agile and do lots of stretching and stuff, so I'm rather hopeful. Hello, Julia. I've got a sneaky suspicion you've just texted me a hello as well, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to answer it. We're in Bradford Market at the moment, exploring all those marvellous little trinkets and things that they had 90 years ago. Most of my time, however, I spent in Bradford itself, renewing old acquaintances. Oh, wait a minute, yeah, that's where I was. Renewing old acquaintances with people and places. Among the... Oh, no, I've read that. What am I talking about? I have read that. I thought that was a bit weird. I sought out some old business colleagues, for I was once, before the war, in the wool trade, though only in a vague fashion. I returned to the dark interior of wool offices and warehouses, with their great bins of blue-wrapped samples, their counters littered with strands of tops and bits of noil, their dim recesses in the warehouses where the massive bales await the sorters, their curiously heavy, greasy smell, their men and lads all in blue brats, whatever a brat is, in blue brats, which is our name for overalls. A.W., once a clerk with me, though my senior, I found in his private office, for he is now in charge of the business and has to pilot it through shallows and whirlpools unknown in the old tranquil days. With him, as warehouseman still, was my old friend N, who looks the same as he did 20-odd years ago. He's a grand type of North Country working man, and I was glad to see him still cheerfully pulling the bales about, though he is in his 60s, and to learn that his two sons are both doing well, one in a shop of his own, and the other in the city's largest store. N was a trooper 40-odd years ago, and was wounded by a spear thrust in the Khyber Pass. He and I talked about our old boss, who died years ago, and was an odd character, quite different from the usual run of wool merchants, who then were earthy, hearty fellows, fond of good living. Our old boss lived only for his business. He was a bachelor, a teetotaler, a non-smoker, who fussed away morning and night with every precious detail of his business, who would not come down even on a bank holiday to brood over his ledgers or write long letters to foreign agents. It never occurred to him that the rest of us did not necessarily regard the exporting of wool tops as the very centre and peak of our lives, and when he kept us in night after night, sometimes hours in the most decent whilst the most decent offices had shut down, he probably imagined that he was doing us a kindness by not compelling us to go out into the dreary world that lay outside the office, by offering us an hour or two more in this colour and glamour of his business. To me, in those days, he didn't seem a real person at all, so far removed were his interests from anything that I could enjoy. I saw him as a sort of powerful robot. It was like working for a Martian. He left about £250,000 sterling, mostly to charity, for he was a dutiful kind of man, and I am certain that he never got a tenth as much out of life as his warehouseman, my friend N, on his pre-war wages of 27 and 30 shillings a week, and his £2.10 now. N and I talked about him among the bales in the dim, greasy warehouse. "Nay, Jack, lad," N observed, "I don't know how chap lived for. He got nowt out at life, didn't he? And I've had more fun in one night than I bet he had in 30 year. He had no mates." I'm doing a terrible accent, but he has written it in this way. "He never went anywhere and enjoyed himself. He had all that brass and didn't know how to spend it. Aye. Don't believe he ever did nowt to do with a woman. Aye, you can't imagine him, can you? But mind you, Jack, lad, he ain't a bad sort. He were peculiar, as you say, but not a bad sort. He wore better to get with no so-and-so." He's written it in North Country abbreviations, you see, so I'm struggling here to read it in said way and interpret what is written, if you see what I mean. Do you see what I mean? I'm sure you do. I'm not reading it now. This is just me making it up. I'm just making it, so don't think this is me reading it. I'm just making it up. I haven't made the whole book up, mind you. "I remember one morning," N continued, "when so-and-so rang me up at warehouse about some bags, and he called me a silly blockhead, 'cause I told him that we hadn't got 'em. Aye, he called me a silly blockhead. So I went straight down the office, and I says to him, 'Did you call me a silly blockhead?' But it was Wait a minute. But it is impossible to suggest in print the meaning deliberation of this aggressive Yorkshire voice. It is tremendous. So he says, 'Aye, dare say I did.' And I says to him, 'Well, don't do it again, 'cause neither you or nobody else is going to call me a silly blockhead. And anyway, we haven't got them bags either.' And he wore careful. And he wore careful what he called me after that," N concluded, and then added, "You know, Jack, lad, you wert only one of the lads in office who were never frightened of so-and-so, and this is very difficult to interpret, and I've always said that about you. You didn't give a damn for him or anybody else, did you? Aye. I've had money a good laugh thinking of things you used to do. Aye, you were a cough drop, good old N. You were a cough drop, good old N. If ever I want to go back to that warehouse and find him gone, that'll be a very black day for me." Gosh, that was quite tricky. A fent is a slang term for a silt or opening or rough end of a piece of cloth. Oh, thank you. I've got that show and hide little thing. I don't know what happens if I do that. All it does is it doesn't do anything. It's very odd. Morning, Richard. Sorry I'm late. Phone call to DWP, says Andy Stacey. Is that the Department of Work and Pensions? Here all, never do for nout. Aye. Right, where are we? Okay. Sorry if you can hear a whistling noise. It's some vehicle reversing outside, making a loud noise, probably at the supermarket. For once, I was lucky in my traffic with old friends. I called at a house which I had not been for many a long year, a house I'd visited a great deal at one time, for an old schoolfellow had lived there, and his parents still lived there. When I called one evening, the house seemed very quiet, and there was a dim light in the bedroom. My heart sank. I had a vision of death, long, dreadful illness, misery and evil. Dubiously, tentatively, I tried the bell. Mr. W. himself opened the door and peered at me through his steel-rimmed spectacles. We had not seen one another for at least 10 years. Recognition, joy, no death, no dreadful illness. He and Mrs. W. were sitting in the back room, and there I sat with them, and we talked of the old times in that house, and of their son, my former schoolfellow and friend, who had collected several university degrees and diplomas, and had now held a very important post, you may have heard of him, in another, larger city. Mr. W. had recently retired and bought a bag of tools from his mill for the last time, and now I confess that it was from him that I took many good hints for my Jess Oakroyd, borrowing his trade and something of his appearance, his mixture of simplicity and real shrewdness, of independence and deep affection. What was sharply different were their respective domestic lives, for this real man had, and still has, a wife in 1,000, and both a son and a daughter to be proud of. And for once, it had ended happily. The tremendous sacrifice these two good folk had made for their son, so that he could collect his degree and diplomas and solid jobs. And I well remember the extent and severity of those sacrifices, and they had not been in vain. He and his wife had recently been staying there, and in a week or two these old people were off to stay with them. It had all turned out as events in the more respected contemporary novels are not allowed to turn out, i.e. for the best. And Mr. W., beaming, fetched a jug of beer, and in old-time fashion, and over it we exchanged reminiscences, and he pointed the stem of his little pipe at me, as of old, when he delivered some shrewd thrusts at the government or the city council and the pompous bigwigs. Of course, it's shocking that a man of his kind, a solid consciousness, hard-working craftsman, should have to make such sacrifice, should have to receive so narrow a slice of good life. Anybody with a glimmer of a notion of what social justice ought to mean should be ready to fight for him and his kind. But on the other hand, I, for one, am equally ready to fight against any scheme that would turn him and his kind into different beings. Bernard Shaw once declared that all he wanted to do was abolish the working class and put in its place some sensible people. But for my part, I would as soon see England filled with men like Mr. W. or old N, and mark you, it is not filled with them, otherwise it would be a different England, as I would see it populated by average members of the Fabian Society. After all, such men of these, like Mr. Shaw himself, stand on their own feet, do their jobs with a will, stoutly resist stupid opposition, but give away to affection, and like him are grand lumps of character. What, in the name of everything but supermen, more can you want? I'm not quite sure what he was getting at there, but hey-ho. You find people writing now about women working in Russia, as if this is some new thing in the world's history. Women have always worked in these textile trades, which would not exist on their present economic basis without them. One unmarried elderly woman of my acquaintance up there had just retired after working 50 years as a weaver in one mill. 50 years! During that time, she and her relatives and most of her friends had not only worked in that enormous mill, but had lived all their lives in its shadow. Time for them had been marked by the sound of its hooter, locally known as a how would you pronounce W-H-E-W? Hui. As a Hui? A hue? 50 years, only broken by the occasional 4 or 5 days at Morecambe or Blackpool. 50 years, living in the same back-to-back houses just behind the mill. Millions of yards of fine fabrics have gone streaming out from their hands to almost every part of the world to be cut into the fashions of the 80s, the 90s, the Edwardians and the Georgians. 50 years of quick, skilled work, with hours in winter lasting from dark to dark. In a world that once went bare, is now partly clothed and decorated with fabrics, then these folk may be said to have lent a hand in the great processes of civilization. They have not been passengers in a ship, a brief childhood at one end and a few sinking weary years at the other end, and between them these 5 solid decades of work. That is their record. Such services do not go unrewarded, of course. A weaver, fit to be kept on working for 50 years, has proved herself valuable old servant of the firm. Therefore she receives a pension of 5 shillings a week from the mill, 5 shillings to do what she likes with. And when to that is added 10 shillings that the rashly generous state is flinging at her, it will be seen that she has a whole 15 shillings a week for herself, which, if she only had herself to consider, and unfortunately in this instance she has to help an invalid sister, would undoubtedly leave her splendidly idle and luxurious at the end of her 50 years. It's a pity that she has someone else to support, because otherwise, no doubt, in this pensioned ease, she could see something of the world for which she has been weaving so long, and could be waited on once in her life, could look at the big shops and buy pretty little presents for her grandnieces and nephews, could, in short, have a wonderful time with her 15 shillings. But perhaps it is well that she cannot go splashing her 15 shillings about, because if she could, although she's old and heavy and tired, she might arouse the indignation of those honest, fiery Tory patriots who write articles for and letters to the newspapers, protesting against the treatment afforded this pampered class, talking like the noblest Romans of us all in this latter age of bread and circuses. Perhaps she is better as she is, wishing she had strength enough to work another of those 50 years, wondering how she would get through the coming week, and never asking herself, as she stirs in the dark mornings when she hears the hooter blowing and the clatter of the feet outside, whether mills were created for men and women, or men and women for mills. She doesn't complain much, perhaps because she realises, like all the protesting gentlemen who lounge before the large club fireplaces, that if, during and after her 50 years of toil, she had been treated with any more consideration, it would have meant the ruin of a great country. And, not being a literary sentimentalist, she doesn't want to say that a country in these years has no title to greatness, had better face... And not being a literary sentimentalist, she does not say that a country in these years has no title to greatness, had better face and risk ruin if it still allows its people to suffer such damnable injustice. Not quite sure what he meant by that, but hey-ho. How are we doing? Checking in late and having a brew in my garden. Oh, yes. Oh, no, is it buffering? Oh, I'm so sorry. Morning, Sir Richard Vobes. When is Prestley in Manchester? Oh, right. Let's have a look. He goes to East Durham, to Tyne, to Lancashire, and he goes to the Potteries next, by the looks of things. So, Manchester... I guess Oh, here. We arrive in Manchester that afternoon, just in time to see a fog descend over the city and to escape its worst consequences. Manchester weather is a popular joke, and I do not care what the local meteorological statistics are. That joke has a solid basis. It's true that I've never visited Manchester in the summer, but at every other season I have visited, the weather has been foul, combining in varying proportions of rain, sleet, and fog. The city always looks as if it had been built to withstand foul weather. There is a suggestion of the fortress about it. You seem to be moving, not a very happy dwarf, between rows of huge black warehouses. Even the public buildings, and there are plenty of them, big, solid, impressive fellows, look as if they are slowly transforming themselves into big, square black warehouses. Perhaps it is these warehouses, or the suggestion of them, the warehouses motif, that make the weather in Manchester seem worse than it is, turning the showers that fall into the dark gulfs of the street between them in the apparent rain. Anyway, yeah, so we do get to Manchester, but he's got to go to the Potteries first, and then it gets into Lancashire in chapter 8. Have I just lost my page? Yes, I have. Oh yeah, I'm on 7. So yeah, I spent 18 years in Manchester. Was it anything like what he's just suggested it was? Big, I mean, big. Obviously, 90 years, a lot's changed, especially manufacturing and all of that. Sorry, just twiddling my eye. It's interesting that people have been in these places. Will seem to be okay now, though. All right, the buffering. It's untrue. It's a great place. I've only ever been to Manchester once, into the centre. My wife's brother, used to live in Manchester. Well, just outside Manchester. I can't remember the village now. And of course, you've got all the moors and stuff around. And the landscape is, superb, isn't it? Fantastic walks and things up round there. So I would like to visit and explore more of that. There's a few more pages. We could get to the end of this chapter and do the West Riding, get it out of the way. Shall we venture on? I'll try and... I haven't read this bit, but we'll just blitz it. It's probably another 10 minutes. So let's see what happens. I had time to note a great many changes in Bradford, and as some of them may be taking place in a good many other provincial towns, they're worth recording here. I think a few, however, are probably peculiar to Bradford. For example, that sad dwindling of the foreign community in the city, and with it the decline of many things they fostered, notably music. The very building which I heard the first orchestras of Richter and Nickisch when I was a boy, the old St. George's Hall, has been turned into a permanent picture theatre. Bradford has no proper concert hall now, more shame to it, and the old Theatre Royal too, where Irving played for the last time, has been turned into a cinema. The city used to have 3 newspapers of its own, 1 morning and 2 evening papers, but now it only has 2, and one of them is certainly not as good as it used to be before the war, when, as I remember well, it was publishing some of the earliest travel essays of H.M. Tomlinson. The Arts Club still exists, but in a very modest fashion, and it is not the institution it was. There is not, to my mind, the wealth in the city there used to be. This is not merely because the wool trade has been producing the wealth hasn't been producing the wealth it used to produce, but also because the richer merchants and manufacturers no longer live in the city. They work there, but they live well outside, like Ilkley and Harrogate and Grassington. The motor has, of course, encouraged this migration, which is common, I suspect, throughout the north, where the wealthier industrialists are busy turning themselves into country gentlemen and are leaving the cities to the professional clerking and working classes. This change may bring out some curious results very soon. When I was a boy, we had certain wealthy families of manufacturers who came as near to forming an aristocracy as the democratic community of ours would allow. Now they're gone, and their place has been taken by other families. The chapter is closed. The main shopping streets have turned with the tide, and a glance at their windows show that the shopkeepers are now trying to attract a much larger, if poorer, public. And of course, you no longer notice much difference between members of various classes. Clogs have disappeared, for they were really very sensible footwear for work, being healthy, comfortable, and cheap, and they carried a bad social stigma on them, even when I was young. I'd forgotten about people wearing clogs, and I guess that was up north, because I always associated that with Amsterdam, but I had it in the back of my mind that people used to wear clogs, and I assume these are the wooden shoes that they're talking about. Yeah, that's interesting. Working woman's shawl is disappearing too, but changes are general. A working woman's shawl. How curious. What are you saying over there? I'm in Didsbury, by the way. Oh, are you? John Blake, Richard. Check out Martin Zero's YouTube channel. He's from Manchester and films in there all around. Oh, right. Yeah, cool. I've heard of him, Mr. Zero. It's a great name, isn't it? There was a terrific Radio 4 play 20 years ago, probably, called Mr. Zero. And it was about these two in Birmingham who had created a robot who they called Mr. Zero. And I just don't know what happened. But the conversation was just this bizarre conversation between these two Brommies. And all I remember them going, Mr. Zero, what are we going to do with Mr. Zero? I don't know what we're going to do with him. Well, we've got to do something with him. We've got him. He's gone out on the streets. I don't know where he is. You don't know where he is? No, I don't know. I've no idea. I've been looking for him all morning. And it was just these two Brummies just gabbling like this. It was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. I think he's down at the bookies. What do you mean? He's going to put some money on the horses. Yeah, I think so, because I saw him with a £5 note. You never did. I did. It's true. Yeah, it was hilarious. Sorry about the dreadful Birmingham accent there. Anyway, yes. Bradford has a civic theatre of which I happen to be president, so I came into contact with the dramatic folk of the city. The civic theatre, which used to be a branch of a similar movement in Leeds, but now has an independent standing, is an organisation of amateur actors with professional producers who give, throughout the winter months, a series of good plays for which they do not charge admission. People who subscribe a few shillings to the theatre are given priority in booking seats, but the seats themselves throughout are free, though, of course, there is a collection to which audiences are expected to contribute as generously as possible. Yeah, so it's not really free at all. Even now, many people do not realise that there is a chain of such theatres, small, intelligent repertory theatres organised on various lines, stretching across the country. Most of them have to struggle along, hardly paying their way. They have not yet produced any brilliant new schools of drama or acting. They've probably not succeeded yet in creating any public real size for intelligent drama, but nevertheless I do not think that my personal interest in the theatre is deluding me when I declare that this dramatic movement, which came into the existence after Hollywood had nearly wrecked the declining professional theatre of the provinces, is of immense and social importance. To begin with, there is a genuine popular movement, not something foisted by rich cranks. The people who work in these theatres are not by any means people who want to kill time. They're generally hard-working men and women, small business men, teachers, clerks, artisans, whose evenings are precious to them. And they are tremendously enthusiastic, even if at times they are also, like all theatrical folk everywhere, given to quarrelling and displays of temperament. Many of them have not only had to work extremely hard for their theatres, but they've also had to face a certain amount of ridicule, and all this with only their own encouragement, and not, as so often happens nowadays, with that of the government or the newspapers. In short, this is a genuine spontaneous movement. If you reckon its supporters merely by quantity, it may seem unimportant, whatever. But if you begin to take quality into account, it's a different story. These theatres are attracting themselves to a more eager, impressionable, intelligent younger people in the industrial towns where depression has hung like a black cloud for the last few years. Some of them, in various places, have told me that what this dramatic work has meant to them, and in many instances the persons in question have not been producing, designing scenery, playing big parts, but mainly may only have been selling programmes and taking tickets or doing the accounts. A dozen of such folk, who use their own wits and form their own judgment, are more significant than 1,000 members of that crowd which is at the mercy of all the forces of publicity and advertisement. For this reason, we must not allow a mere consideration of numbers to influence us. These theatres are very small and have to fight for their very existence, but the more I've seen of industrial England, the more firmly I'm convinced that it would be easier to underestimate than overestimate their significance. I see them as little campfires twinkling in the great darkness. I'm not writing now as an occasional dramatist whose plays are being performed in such theatres, but as a novelist desperately turned social historian, addressing himself to readers who may possibly not care twopence if every play in the house in the country should close tomorrow. The point is that in communities that have suffered the most from industrial depression, among younger people who frequently cannot see what is to become of their job and lives, these theatres have opened a little window into a world of ideas, colour, fine movement, exquisite drama, and have kept going a stir of thought and imagination for actors, helpers, audiences, and have acted as outposts for an army of the citizens for tomorrow, demanding to live, though they should possibly have less food on their table and shabbier clothes on their back, a life at once more ardent and imaginative, and more thoughtful than their fathers and their mothers ever knew. Fair dinkum. There is something very ironical about Bradford's present position as a theatrical town, and much of what follows, I believe, applies to a good many of the industrial towns in the north. While the professional theatre regards it as a very poor place indeed, hardly on the map any longer, actually it is the theatrically minded to a most fantastic and droll degree. It is a city crowded with amateur actors. I have never known anything like it. Operas, musical comedies, farces, dramas. The place hums with them. Every second typist is an ingenuine. I don't know what that means. Is a lead of somewhere. Every other cashier, a heavy father or a comedian. Acres of canvas are being transformed into rural scenes and library sets every week. All the young electricians can rig you up floats and battens or spots at a moment's notice. The local papers print whole pages of amateur stage photographs. Nearly every organisation appears to run a dramatic society as an offshoot. The young man frowning into vacancy at the other end of the tram is probably working out the movements of his first act of The Silver Box. The large man who just nodded to him is probably about to turn himself into the comic bailiff in Tilly of Bloomsbury. There are sombrettes and tragedines, sombrettes and something masculine and female there, but I don't know what they are, in all the shops. The very factories produce their own revues and pantomimes. All the town's a stage. And if this seems so much fanciful exaggeration, I can offer cold figures. During the last municipal year, the number of amateur dramatic licences issued in Bradford passed a total of 700. And here, at last, there is distinct local drama. At least, there is a distinct local drama written by local men and women in the West Riding dialect. Through the royalties paid to these most dramatic societies though the royalties paid by these dramatic societies must obviously be very small, there are so many of them that I know at least 2 local dramatists who are almost entirely supported by such royalties. I'm quite ready to believe that Bradford, which, after all, has not one particularly histrionic population of its own, is by no means alone in this recent and astonishing passion for theatricals. It is, of course, symptomatic of a change in the whole temper and outlook of the industrial North, of a general desire for more movement and colour and imaginative activity in life, and of a new healthier protest against the merely passive amusement which is regarded as one of the weaknesses of our mechanical civilization. To me, a pre-war Bradfordian, some examples of this, my eyes are dancing around like nobody's business and trying to focus on the words. To me, a pre-war Bradfordian, some examples of this changed outlook took my breath away, as, for instance, when I heard that one middle-aged couple of my acquaintance bought products of a fairly grim nonconformity, were having their little girl, the youngest child and the apple in their eye, seriously trained as an acrobatic dancer. It didn't take much of that to send me wandering about dazed, a stranger in my own town. And what seemed to you the greatest change here? I asked a very intelligent middle-aged woman, an old Bradford friend. She thought for a moment and then, startled by my demand, said, "Where are the men?" Oh, sorry, my eyes are just dancing about now. She thought for a moment, then startled me by demanding, "Where are the men?" I asked her to explain, and she continued, "There never seem to be any men about nowadays, whatever you are doing or wherever you go. Plenty of women, but no men. It doesn't matter what it is, the drama society, the lectures, or the theatre, or a political meeting. They're all women. Where do men go today? In the old days, there used to be at least as many men interested in everything as women. It was half and half, but now it isn't. Yes, I know there was the war, but that doesn't explain it. After all, there's another generation growing up since then, and you see the girls in everything, but not the boys and the men. What do they do with themselves? They don't go to pubs every night as they used to, and it's not that. It isn't even the pictures, because they're mostly women that go there too. Do they just sit at home and play with their wirelesses, or what? That's not a euphemism, by the way. I tell you, it's a mystery to me, and nobody can explain it. Neither could I, though the problem reminded me of one I'd heard so often in London from persons who knew more than I do about the youngest generation of adults, especially the upper middle class, namely that this generation of young men are far more subdued and less enterprising and ambitious than the girls, who seem to have mysteriously acquired all the dash and virility. Whether this is true everywhere, I do not know. Indeed, I do not know if it's true anywhere, and I suspect it to be one of those grand conclusions drawn from a few hasty glimpses of young people at parties and dances. Certainly, there seemed to me, as a visitor, plenty of young men about in Bradford. I met one man I was glad to meet, for it proved, as I thought it would, the most odd and illuminating encounter. I was introduced to him on the ground floor of a very dingy warehouse where he was doing an odds and ends sort of business in various textile commodities. He was a man who had been a legend up there ever since the war. I had never heard of him before the war, but afterwards I'd hardly ever heard about anyone else. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the end of this chapter, which is just a couple of pages, and my eyes are just... let me just have a pause for a moment, because my eyes are... The words are blurred, and it's hard to read when they get a bit blurred. Let's focus on what you guys are saying. And again, this show and hide thing. I don't know what this show and hide thing... I get this... I showed you before, and I don't know what it means. Let me just show you what I see. Here, on the left-hand side, you get those two blocks halfway down the text of the chat room, and it says show and hide. I don't know if anybody else gets that. Perhaps you could let me know. But when I press show, for example, it just disappears and I get nothing shown. I don't know why. I don't know how you even instigate show and hide. I'm just going to try and read some of your stuff, because now that's all blurred. Everything's all blurred in my world at the moment. Charles Richardson, can you play Dad's Army theme tune from Charles? No, I haven't. I've got no means of playing that, really. Mark Donny McLeod says, yes, we have a biscuit factory. It's in Nelson, near me, and I can smell it when they're making jammy Dodgers. Drives your nose mad. Yeah, I bet it does. What's your favourite film from Charles? Charles, are you spamming the thing? Please don't. Can we play What's in the Box game, Richard? I'm just putting you on timeout for a bit, because you're beginning to be irritating. No, not here, Richard. Morton says, Mr. O'Connell I was born in Solihull, West Midlands, but I left at 19 and spent most of my adult life in Lancashire, Morpeth, Tyneside, Manchester, Stockport, Wigan, Leeds. Yes, love the north. I do want to explore. I mean, I'm clearly a softy southerner, and most of my videos are based in this area because it's far easier at this stage with limited budget to do much more. But that said, and this is where a book like this is really interesting, of what life was like 90 years ago and the industrial north before many of the changes that came, I suppose, at the end of the Second World War, and how in many ways life was very fixed and hadn't changed much. That's what I get from the Victorian period or the Georgian Industrial Revolution period, where it seems that up north the factories and manufacturing came in, and then we started to lose all of that manufacturing at the end of the Second World War. And it's not a history that I know terribly much about, but it would be fantastic to go on an adventure travelling round that part of the world and exploring that, and hope that the Midlands and the northern people will accept a softy southerner poking his nose and camera around those places. It is. I know that some of these places, like when I went to the Peak District, they've got factories and they turn them into museums and things, and while that is quite interesting, and then you've just got droves of tourists wandering around like confused ants, getting vague impressions of what really went on, but not real impressions, and coming away and telling their families that, oh, I went to this factory and it was like this, and it all looked very jolly and clean and tidy, when of course the reality is completely the reverse. So yeah, it would be fascinating to do that. Rusty Buttplate says, "You're back feeling any better?" It sort of comes and goes, really. It feels okay now. I dare say when I get up in a minute, it's going to give me a jip. Morton Lewis says, "You in the north would be very funny." Oh, really? I do love the solid architecture that you find in the north. You know, the big solid buildings, the archways where it would have gone into some form of yard that horses and carts and lorries and things would have come in. I love the way Priestley describes the trams everywhere. Tram ride here and a tram ride there. We have so few trams down here that they very much are a mystery, I suppose, or a novelty to somebody in the south. Turbo Stream says, "I was born in Bolton, but I've lived most of my life in Birmingham." So what's the difference between Bolton and Birmingham in terms, obviously not size and scale, but is there a difference? Rusty says, "Careful with the back injections." I wouldn't inject anything. I have a friend that got a botched epidural. They poked a hole in the disc and is most completely bedridden. Fudge cakes. That's no good. Richard, most of the industrial mills are now very expensive apartments. Yes, and then that's an irony, isn't it? That is an irony that people are living surrounded in wealth, with beautiful carpets, no doubt, and wonderful technology, large televisions, and nice ceramics and whatever, very, very expensive kitchen units, etc., on the very place that children were forced to work for long hours, and women whose fingers were probably nearly literally worn to the bone, and men toiled, with sweat and blood. It is a strange irony, and I wonder how comfortable I would actually feel living in such affluence in a place that once was the lifeblood of British industry and the affluence of the mill owner, but a monotonous, repetitive, boring life for the thousands of people who work there. That must be a very strange juxtaposition. Bolton is tiny compared to Birmingham. Yes, of course. I'm really thinking that the centres and the people and what the difference is, I suppose. Back just behind another video part to you, Richard. You should have 3 with the recipe by now. Oh yes, I did see some coming in actually, so thank you so much for that. Charles Richardson, how lovely. Julia Richard from Charles. Great. I just want to try and finish this chapter before we go. I realise that we've been on for an hour and 8 minutes. I've only got this page. It just means that page and a half. It just means that we can start the next chapter to the potteries. So I will just finish this and then I will leave you in peace for a bit. I probably won't this afternoon do a live. I was doing a live in the afternoon talking books and things, but I probably will not do that today, if that's okay. I'm going to try and do some filming, but probably inside, and I shall certainly look at the recipe that Mark Donny MacLeod is sending. Right, my eyes seem a little bit better and less jumpy now. So we see how we go. Do you like the lighting setup, by the way? It's a bit different from the usual Vogue show. I just thought I'd try something a little bit different. It's quite jolly. where were we? He'd met this bloke. I'm sort of losing the will on this, really. This. Do you know? I think I just looking here. He's sort of more of the. Sometimes he goes off on a thing, and he goes off on. He's talking about lots of acting stuff in this last page. It's hardly worth going through it, really. Let's start afresh, because I've sort of broken the mode now. Let's start afresh, chapter 7, when we come back tomorrow, to the potteries. That sounds like rather grand fun. So I'm going to do that, break off now. Sorry if you were wanting to get every last syllable that I've abridged it. I've abridged it fractionally. I hope that's okay. Nigel Kipling says your setup looks beautiful, great. Thank you very much. Yes, it's getting a bit better. I mean, it's a bit of a messy backdrop. I need to sort that out. Charles, you're asking lots of questions which are not associated to what we're talking about. You sort of try and keep within the theme would be great, because I can't really answer, because you're just sort of firing random questions. Busy Bee, if you could come north, Richard, please do not start with Bradford, or you'll be very disappointed with it, as would J.B. Prestley. I did drive through Bradford. I had some corporate work to do about 6 years ago, probably, something like that. And yes, it was a shock, actually. It was a shock. Getting into the centre, and there's I don't know whether it's the town hall or some big, huge, what would you call it? Council type building, but there's a better word than that. Municipal building in the centre there, and some lovely, what I thought was lovely architecture. But yes, I'll say no more than the rest of it was a bit of a shock. So I might avoid Bradford. Although, of course, it would be interesting to go around Bradford to compare the difference between 90 years ago, as in Priestley's book, and what it is now. Take a rest, lad. We'll do it all tomorrow. Thank you very much. Yes, Richard, see you tonight. I have no wet wrench on this channel. Oh, yes, you have no wrench. Hang on, Julia. Let's just see if I can do something just as you're... Hang on. How about now, Julia? I've just pressed a button, and I don't know if it's a permanent thing or a temporary thing, but just try that. See if you have any. Who J.B. Priestley? Richard from Charles. Well, Charles, I have been reading The English Journey by J.B. Priestley, who is an author who wrote this book in 1933. I suspect long before you were born. I suspect you were born this century as opposed to last century. And he was an author who wrote many interesting things. The Good Companions is one of his books, but he also wrote theatre plays. Green for Danger was turned into a film starring Alistair Sim, a brilliant tragic comic actor who you will clearly never have heard of, but is revered by many a cinema goer. Yes, Julia has her wrench. Now, I'm hoping that, Julia, you can use that wrench to your pleasure when I go live on other occasions. Rami Boo says, I saw a short bit on York the other night. TV gorgeous. I thought you and Julia would make it up to Yorkshire. You need to go there. Very old buildings. Oh yes, York is stunning. Yorkshire, that whole area is stunning. There's so much to see, and it's an undiscovered place for me. But once all this nonsense is lifted, and we've got out of this situation, believe you me, the bug now to improve what I do, to go further, to look at stuff, improve the quality of my videos. It has is so part of, I can't form my sentences. Oh, JB Prestley, help me out with some words. To improve myself is very much my remit. It's very much my agenda. It's very much my purpose. I want to. If only I had better command of the English language. It's really disappointing and frustrating when I am unable to pull the words to my mind instantly. It really gripes me. The luminous beetles travelling up a wall. I love some of his descriptions, and if only I could remember them. Just as Laurie Lee has some amazing descriptions as he travels to Spain, and he leaves England, and he's travelling through Wembley, of all places, in sort of suburban London, and he looks through people's windows from the pathway as he walks past, and he describes people as fermenting behind lace curtains. And I just thought that is so lovely. People fermenting behind lace curtains. I love good use of language. I just wish I was better. What is your favourite J.B. Prestley book from Charles? At the moment, English Journey, what I'm reading to you. I haven't read a great deal. I've only read one other book. I've got another one of his, which is something to do with England. I haven't read that. But this one I was referenced to in another book I was reading. And I can't remember what it was. Whether it was... it might have been something by Trevelyan, who wrote Social History of the English. And it might have been him who referenced something in the English Journey. Somebody had, or was it? It might have been a more modern author than that, actually, and reference him by just saying in his journey, basically, Priestley had made this observation that you could be in Southampton or Carlisle, but you saw the same red brick string of houses that meant that you could be anywhere up and down the country. And he felt that the country had become pretty ubiquitous, the architecture was ubiquitous everywhere. In other words, no change. And it was a shame that everything was becoming more bland, that the individual characters of every village and town in different regions were coming together. And that was in 1933. And I think now, here we are with burger shops on every corner, coffee shops, chain stores on every shop, so that you come to the point where you think there is no point leaving my house and going to another town because they're just the same. They've got the same shops, the same features, but they do not have the same history, and that's where the life, funnily enough, is. I'm going to stop now. Your reading is great to listen to, even when you pause and take a moment. Thank you, Julia. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. Priestley's use of language is lyrical. Yeah. I mean, it's lyrical, and of course, remembering that he actually comes from the north as well. It is great. I turn up the sound so I can listen while doing stuff in the kitchen and other goodies. Brilliant. Well, yes. I mean, that's really that. The idea isn't that you just sit and watch a man looking at a book. It's more that it's a way of entertaining people by reading and making. And actually, I quite like the slight pauses where I would comment and ask you, what does that word mean? Like, was it a lint we had earlier? I think a lint or something. I've forgotten now what the meaning was, but it's nice because somebody will go and look it up and say, oh yeah, this is what it is. I think shops are the same, but their architectural differentiation. Yes, absolutely, and that's still the reason to go travelling, is to look beyond the hoardings, the plastic and plate glass hoardings that are there with the lights shining through, telling you it's the same shop as all that brand that is ubiquitous. But underneath that is looking for the real town and the real place and how people lived. Because I think that still is reflected in the people who live there, even though we are very much a more cosmopolitan travelling type of people, and that people living up north may not actually be born and bred northerners, just as down in the south. Morton says, very homesick, but Madrid is my home now. Yes. I would love to go to Spain. I went to Spain on holiday with my, when I was younger, with family, to, naff hold holidays that kids love. Reading some books. One book by what's his name? Winston Graham, who wrote the Poldark books, but he wrote other books. And there's a terrific book, I forget the title, and it's about an English campaign, I think, to go and fight the Spanish. But it's fantastic the way he talks about Cadiz, and I hadn't realised, he talks about the geographical area of it, and Cadiz, I think, is up on a rock promontory, with a harbour, or I can't remember. I can't exactly remember. But he talks about the narrow streets and the heat, and the killings. And it's set in something like the 18th century period. It may even be set before. Actually, I think he's set in the time of Francis Drake, so in the 16th century. But yeah, fantastic. He describes the weather and the streets and the hovels and the narrow passages and stuff of some of these harbours, and then there's this route that goes on in Cadiz, which sounds fantastic. And for me, I'm not overly keen on travel to other places unless I've really read up about it and know what it is I'm looking at, because it's very hard to interpret. It's like going to a museum and seeing a million ancient artifacts, and at first you go, well, it's a flint axe and it's a this and it's a that, and then after a while it just becomes more of the same and you can't get a grip on it. Whereas if you've read a little bit about, say, I don't know, the Neolithic period, and you realise that how these flint axes were fashioned, how they were made, and how the flint was dug from 30 feet below the surfaces, and the tunnel and the mines they dropped, and how they tunnelled between the two, and you have a little bit of knowledge about what it is then that you're looking at and its history and how it came to be. Suddenly that makes it so much more interesting. Morton says yes. Cadiz, yes, Cadiz. Fent was the word. Thank you, Audrey, for looking that up again. Winston Graham, yeah, cracking. I've read quite a few of Winston Graham's other books. I did start reading some of the Poldark, and the first four or five books, they were good. But I was very interested in some of his other work. An interesting author. Anyway, must stop. Back needs to be lubricated, not with alcohol, but with motion. So, and my God, we've been going for an hour and a half on this reading. So sorry, apologies to anybody who's tuned into this and just wanted to listen to English Journey. We've been prattling along doing other things, but we have been amusing ourselves, so it's all been fun. I must go and make myself a cup of coffee and perhaps have a little biscuit, which would be nice. Rami Boo says, really enjoying this reading, Richard. Thank you again. It's my pleasure. It's so nice. And one of the upsides of this dreadful situation is having this private little, well, not private, but it's kind of private to us, this wonderful little community where we can all just have a chinwag and get together. Sorry, little stabbing pain there, so I better go. But, we're looking, I think, in a situation like this for all the little silver linings which take us forward. Anyway, take care. Have a nice time, and I'll catch up with you later. I won't do a live this afternoon. I'm going to take a bit of time off to relax the back and try and make a video for tomorrow. So I've got something to go up because I haven't been out at all today. Mark Dominic fans, I love seeing how things look. My father got me into the history and would take me as a youth to places to show me things, from books like Far from the Madding Crowd. Oh yes, that's a very good book. Thomas Hardy, isn't it? Anyway. Somebody sent me some nonsense. Nice to see you. To see you, nice. Good game, good game. All right, my love. Let's look at the old scoreboard. I'll catch up with you anon. Take care and thank you for watching. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.